Transfer me to anyone else. Whatever you say, ma'am. During the summer of 2020, I worked customer service for an online retailer. It is the worst job I've ever worked. While most people were polite, kind and understanding, I had to deal with many people who were, often justifiably, upset about a problem with their order. But even then, most people would be sure to say their anger was not directed towards me. Faking sympathy for these people was hard enough. But then there would be people berating me personally as if I had something to do with whatever problem they were complaining about. One day, the system we used to track people's orders was down. I wouldn't be able to cancel orders, check when the shipping date was, change the shipping address. Nothing. The supervisor told us to tell the customers to call back in an hour, at which point the system would hopefully be back up again. Most people were understanding that there was literally nothing I could do to modify their orders, and said they would call back later. This one lady calls me and is upset about something and wants me to cancel her order. I tell her I apologize for the inconvenience, but I can't at the moment, and that she should call back in an hour. She was not happy with the response. She starts going off about how that is unacceptable. She doesn't have time later. Take down her information and do it later once the system is back up. This is horrible customer service, etc. I constantly have calls coming in, so I can't be dealing with her problem at the same time as speaking to another customer. And more importantly, my shift was going to be finished in 20 minutes and I sure as hell wasn't waiting around for the system to be back up and doing overtime to cancel this lady's order. Especially with her rude, entitled attitude. Eventually, she decides that she has had enough of me, and asks to speak with my supervisor. Summer of 2020 is peak COVID, so I was working from home. I explain the situation and say I can't just pass the phone to my supervisor, but what I can do is escalate the issue by putting in a ticket, and a supervisor will call them back in 2,448 hours. Of course, this is not good enough for her. She is yelling at me at this point, going on and on about how awful this customer service is, and she is not accepting that there is nothing I can do at the moment. She decides she doesn't want to speak to me anymore and screeches at me to just transfer me to anyone else. I don't care. I don't want to speak to you anymore. I say okay, just give me a moment. As I'm thinking in my head, you did say anyone. I transfer her to the Spanish customer service line. TLDR. Customer service job. System to modify, cancel orders was down. Lady didn't like that, got frustrated and asked to speak with anyone else. I transferred her to the Spanish customer service line. I find the phrase, "we hate it as much as you do," to be very helpful when dealing with something beyond your control. I'm sorry. The system is down completely for at least an hour. Possibly more. Nobody, not my supervisor, not my manager, not even God himself, can access anything until it's fixed. We hate it as much as you do, but there's absolutely nothing we can do right now. I'm sorry and I wish I had better news. Well, when they don't specify to where you are to transfer them to, it could be anyone within the company, or to someone outside the company. Back in the 1990s, I was visiting my cousin at her new job. She wasn't front line but part of the escalation team that calls got sent to for those really bad Karens that would call. One good thing about the department she worked in was that she had brilliant direct supervisors who were great to work for. The supervisors allowed for that good old malicious compliance and even had printed and on every cubicle wall. If you ever have a person that has been transferred to escalations tell you the following line: just transfer me to anyone that is willing to listen. Then you can feel free to transfer them to whatever number first comes to mind. Do make a note of where you transferred them to for future reference when they are bound to call back up. Well, My cousin came up with the most brilliant one of all. She would transfer them back to their own number. Most people back then had call waiting activated on their home phones. So she would ask them to hold one moment, then transfer them out to their own number. Because the call waiting was activated, it would just ring out because it didn't get answered, or would end up going to their own voicemail service with the phone company. And because they are seething over being put on hold, not catch their voice, or someone they recognized on the recording, then leave a scathing MSG. 5% of the time the person would put the call to the company on hold to answer the incoming call, only to find their own hold music now on the line, and either hang up not wanting to deal with that and return to their previous call which they just hang up on, or sit there waiting for someone. This reminds me of a time our system was down. I had just taken a next day air order and the system crashed. A contractor at the home office had cut a power cable and shut down IT. I called the customer back and got a woman at the customer's office. I explained the situation and told her that since we worked on a locator system, the order may not ship. She blew up at me and ranted how much business we got from them. Multiple state locations. And we should go look for the item. Her whole attitude implied that I had gone up and cut the cable. I told her in a firm, snarky tone that I would ask the warehouse to look for it, but since we had a 50,000 square foot warehouse, we may not be able to find it. I hung up and went out back. Fortunately, one of the warehouse men had just restocked the item and knew where it was. I called the customer back and got a different person. I explained the situation and told him that we may have to ship without a packing slip. He was agreeable to that. I then made a mild complaint about the treatment I had received when I called earlier. He said that she had been overheard and was being talked to and that she was new to the industry. I told him that, with her attitude, she would not get old in the industry. I mean, yeah, you and anybody else available was physically unable to do jack until the network was fixed. Nature of the beast lady played stupid games and won stupid prizes. Legend has it that the Spanish customer service line is staffed by bilingual people with better English skills than the offshored customer service folks. Back in the day, I worked for Hilton Reservations Worldwide. This was during the time a certain heiress was ubiquitously popular. I would often get calls from dickweeds asking, only half-jokingly, for her phone number. One day, after being asked for her number for the umpteenth time that day, I had enough, so I began giving out the direct number for the Hilton Hotel in Paris, France. Well, they asked for Paris Hilton's phone number. So, when I was a feckless 18-year-old working at a Dell call center doing call transfer work, I would transfer irate people to 1800 Snapple. That phone line started with an obnoxiously chipper, "Hi, I'm the Snapple lady." Quote, "In retrospect, I absolutely deserved to be fired. Lol." Years ago I knew a guy who worked at a call center where everyone had the right to hang up on abuse. The absolute right. Then they'd call back and wait 20 minutes to get to the head of the line. More abuse? Hang up. And he said most people got past their anger after the second hang-up and were polite the third time. They got the word. I work insurance claims for small business. I call insurance companies all day. When I call to check on the claim, I act like I'm supposed to act nice and respectful. If you tell me what I want to know and the claim isn't older than 30 days, I'm fine. But it's when the claim has been going on for 6 months that my blood boils. I know the person who answers the phone is just reading from a script they are told to. It's still denied. That's funny because the person last week said it was processing and they told me what was happening. Well, the person on the phone is finally looking back at all the notes from the past 6 months to find out what's going on. So I tell them, I told you. Then after 45 minutes on the phone with one person and one claim. If you can't tell me exactly what is happening, transfer me to supervisor. 95% of them drop the call. Amazing how it drops when I ask for supervisor or answers to legit questions to why this keeps happening. All the while I'm still being nice and respectful. It's when they just don't do their jobs and I don't have patience after 45 minutes of being on hold that start to get to me. I have no doubt that some of these CSR just transfer me to someone else and not a supervisor. In a very similar case in my youth, I may have transferred someone who was demanded to be transferred to someone who could help them. To the Samaritans Support Suicide Prevention Helpline. I was expecting you'll give the phone to your dad or something, tears of joy. She starts going off about how that is unacceptable. She doesn't have time later. Take down her information and do it later once the system is back up. If anyone wants to come back to reality where we all aren't subservient to corporations, this is not an unreasonable request, demand. Why can't someone just write down some data and sew it later? Because metrics are more important than service or product. In the US, the Spanish line usually goes to a Texas call center, so the person they end up talking to has a pretty good chance of speaking English. I sometimes press the key for Spanish when I have to call a call center, if I know it's outsourced. This is not MC. The Spanish language CS people often have been exposed to enough English language jerks that they're quite good at handling them. In addition, they've had to learn how to explain things in a foreign language. That's awesome. Wish I'd seen her face. Man, I wish we had a Spanish customer service line back when I was doing customer service, haha. But it was a fairly sketchy company who took care of online orders for an Australian retail store and a bunch of other companies. But because we also did counsel after hours, they were allowed to keep us in the office instead of WFH. One time I'm talking to a customer and she complained that I couldn't help with her order because Australia Post, who was very overloaded with all the packages that they started getting because of COVID lockdown, lost their package. So instead of being able to transfer, I'm waiting around on the phone because a customer wants to speak to the supervisor. I put her on hold. Try calling the supervisor. We only had one for some reason. They couldn't be bothered hiring more. But we weren't allowed to do that. So I comply and just wait. I keep telling her the supervisor is busy and that she would call her back later. But she still wanted to wait on the line. So I keep complying, but because I can't have dead air. I wish this had a malicious ending, but unfortunately she gave up and hung up the phone after waiting for like 25 minutes, just sitting with me waiting for a supervisor to be transferred to. Companies first of all go to great lengths to prevent a customer from reaching any human being. By the time I've negotiated several robot phone trees, my blood pressure is quite high. I understand this is not the fault of the human being who eventually takes the call. But it's extremely difficult and possibly beyond my capacity to not be frustrated and angry from negotiating ridiculous robot phone trees. Taking it out on the human is not fair and wrong. However, I am absolutely sick of companies showing contempt for their customers by attempting to prevent them from getting to human beings. And that's what it is. Contempt for customers. I would have transferred her to a psych ward, but I'm not a very nice person, so I have to admit, I've done the same. When they get quiet, get right up next to the ceiling and start screaming and going on for 5 minutes. When cops come, tell them her panic attack caused you to have one LOL.
If you enjoyed this video, please check out our playlists full of similar content. Epicaricast is like doom scrolling for your ears. Please like, share, and subscribe.